because personal growth is really just different, reaching new levels of awareness. And I love that you mentioned a common thread that we all have in common is this desire for betterment and this desire for improvement.
Hello, high achiever. Welcome to the Inside Job Journey podcast. I'm Tiana, a certified professional coach. I work with highly effective and driven people that are always striving for more, helping them define what that more is and learning what they really want. In this podcast, I want to bring you on a discovery journey where you can learn more about what's driving you to never settle. Hello, high achiever. Welcome to another episode of the Inside Job Journey podcast. Today with me, I have Kelsey Mead, an amazing mindset and personal development coach. She's also a host of her own podcast, The Vibrant Life. And welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me on and having me here today. I selfishly love being a guest on other people's podcasts because it's nice to just lean back and be the guest. So thank you so much for having me here. And what a beautiful introduction. I'm like, oh wait, that's me. I know her.
It's amazing. And that's something common when you are a guest on a podcast and someone else introduces you and you're like, nice. What else can I say about me that they didn't already say it? And it happened with most of my guests. They were like, it's nice to hear it back, right?
Yeah. And it's nice to hear it from someone outside of ourselves, right? So yeah, thanks again. I'm so excited to be here and dive into our conversation today. I love the work that you do, and I'm so excited for your journey into podcasting. It's an adventure, but it teaches us so much about ourselves too.
Definitely. And what I like about, hosting a podcast, is also having the opportunity to connect with all those different people. And up to now, I had people from all over the world and with very different backgrounds that some came to coaching, some are not coaches. But what is really amazing of all those people is the internal growth, the internal search for improvement and betterment. So in that sense, I always loved also to listen to podcasts. And recently, your latest episode was around 3 phrases that keep us stuck. And I think there were the 3 phrases, but what stuck with me was really around using the word never. Never use the word never.
Never say never, right? Yeah, that was a good episode. And I think if anyone is listening to this and wants to get the full details on that, we're obviously not going to rehash it here, but go take a listen. Yeah, I know I'd asked you before we started recording what your biggest takeaway was, and it was never. What about that like stuck out to you? I'm just curious.
It's really about the fact that we don't realize sometimes that we are using it or that we are thinking about the word. And if I reflect back, I realize I do use it. And in my mind, it's popping up from time to time. And it's just, I don't realize it until someone else guides me through most of the things that are in our head. Until they're there, it's hard to have a grasp of fully how much impactful they are. But then you talk to someone, you speak it out, and you realize, oh my gosh. So you do a lot of work in terms of mindset. And I think words are a big part of how we shift or how we put ourselves into a better shape.
It's so true. So a little bit of backstory for anyone that is maybe meeting me for the first time here. Nice to meet you. I got my I got started in personal development and mindset work because I really did start to have that awareness that I didn't like the way that I was thinking. And I was at that point in my life, gosh, this was probably like 8 to 10 years ago, that I've been on this journey and really doing the work, so to speak. But I had the level of awareness, because personal growth is really just different, reaching new levels of awareness. And I love that you mentioned a common thread that we all have in common is this desire for betterment and this desire for improvement. Because I was actually thinking about that today. I'll put a pin in that and kind of circle back to that. But what got me started in this work was that level of realization. I don't like the way that I'm speaking to myself. I don't like the way my thoughts feel, and specifically about my body. And in that season of my life, I was a typical yo-yo dieter, typical high achiever, right? High achiever persona. And we like validation of efforts, and we like to jump from this challenge to that challenge. And I was just kind of noticing that I didn't like treating my body like it was a challenge. And I started to be honest that I didn't really like dieting, and I didn't like control, and all of these things that diet mentality kind of goes against, like, natural arts, a lot of times our natural desires. And my deepest core value is freedom. Well, if you have a core value of freedom and you're trying to do all of these things that are rigid and controlling, it creates like this level of resistance, right? And so it's like I was trying to move in one direction, but the construct that I was putting around myself wasn't working. And it was creating just this dynamic inside of dislike for myself. And I have this moment, I talk about it on my podcast, but I'll share it again, where I call it my enough is enough moment that tipped the scales, and I bought my first personal development book. I had done this really long workout, and I was pushing my body so hard and restricting calories. And I remember going into the bathroom and stepping on the scale, and I still wasn't satisfied. Like, the number hadn't gone down enough, or it hadn't changed enough. And I think I just hit my like internal breaking point. I slammed my hands on the bathroom counter. I remember looking myself in the mirror, and I said something along the lines of, enough is enough, or you deserve better than this. You deserve to treat yourself better than this. Something along those lines, where it really like resonated with me. Like, I received my own medicine for once. And I went out and I bought my first personal development book, and that was Judgment Detox by Gabby Bernstein. Are you familiar with any of her work?
Yeah, I mean, and just the fact that the first thing you worked on is judgment. It says
Basically the pinnacle of all self-sabotage is judgment. It had to be like a God thing, a universe thing that was guiding me to look at this first, because for me, again, I was really self-critical. I was really, really critical of myself, which equals judgment, right? So I had seen like Instagram ads or Facebook ads for this book. I had seen this woman. I had seen bits and pieces of her work before. And for whatever reason, that was the one. I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And it cracked me wide open. I would say that was the cracking wide open of what began my spiritual awakening and mindset journey.
And there are so many things that you say that I want to touch on, but there's one that stuck with me. It's the fact that your core value was being like attacked by what you were doing. And so there was this misalignment with who you really wanted to be and what you were doing. So can you talk a little bit more about that piece and how to really find that alignment within?
Yeah, I love that you use misalignment because it's so true, right? Desperately in my core, in my being, I wanted freedom. And everything I was doing was the exact opposite of what my true nature was wanting and wanting to be. And again, misalignment is really interesting because that's ultimately what it is. When we are out of alignment with our core values and we are acting out of alignment with our core values, that's what makes us feel off. And a lot of times in this space, clients will come in, or I'm sure you've heard this, people say, I'm just feeling off. And then they just try to overhaul their entire life. And it's like, well, wait a second, there's probably just some little tweaks we could make here to get you back into alignment with your values, because values, from a subconscious standpoint, identity, beliefs, and values are the deepest layer of our subconscious. And and if we're talking about who we are being, that's where that originates.
And one thing that I love about what you said, the little tweaks. So when I hear people wanting to change or feeling like enough is enough, sometimes we want everything now. We want big changes, big revolutions, taking big steps. All has to be big, but in the small things lies the momentum, lies the progress, lies the power of moving forward.
Yeah, I think bouncing off of what you said in the small things, what kind of came up for me there was, in small things there can be great joy. And eventually, it might take a complete overhaul of your entire life, but rarely is that what is truly necessary to create momentum and create momentum towards that change, which is interesting too, because it challenges the all or nothing mindset, which many of us have as high achievers. Most of us do, because that's just how the patterns that we've created to become successful. We often act in the realm of extremes. And so when something isn't working, we're like, we just want to fix it now, so then we don't have to deal with the discomfort, right? And it's so funny because that anytime I had tried to do that and operate in the extremes, it never worked, because it wasn't right. So when I was talking about my core value being freedom, trying to fit food freedom into the construct of a diet, it's basically like a finger trap. You're pulling one way and pulling the other, and suddenly, nothing really feels like it's going anywhere.
I like that analogy. It's really, the image of pulling. And that's what I notice, is that with the all or nothing, it's really pulling you into two different directions, because from one side you want to change, you want to see the progress, and from the other side you are just sabotaging yourself with these constant high expectations, high standards, because you said it's a pattern that we learn. And I'm just curious to know what has worked for you to really keep those expectations in check, or to give yourself time to progress.
Such a great question. I think what has worked best for me, because I do identify as that high achiever type profile, a lot of unlearning. For me, it was a lot of unlearning of hustle and striving. And what's interesting about that is a lot of that is often glamorized. And I don't want to downplay hard work, because I do believe that you can't just sit back and your dreams are going to build themselves. Like, there has to be effort. So how do we do that without burning ourselves out? How do we find joy in those small little steps? For me, it is playing the long game. When I stopped, so I'm going to use dieting again for an example. When I traded like a 30-day challenge for a lifestyle, it took so much pressure off of me to quote unquote have to hit goals. And even we could even look at goals that in that sense. Ultimately, I shifted my goal. Where my goal used to always be weight loss, I gave myself a new benchmark for success and a new target. And that was health and happiness. And so I started unlearning old behaviors of striving and hustle, creating more stability and consistency, playing the long game, like I said, trading that short-term target for more of a long-term lifestyle. And through the process of that, I was able to actually hit goals that I had in mind that I wanted to hit, like getting stronger and leaner and shedding fat, when that goal of weight loss was no longer something that was motivating me, because I was motivated for all the wrong reasons too in the past. So there's just a lot of deconstruction that kind of happened here for me, but I apply the same philosophy in business. And we see this happen a lot because I do coach a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs. And if they haven't worked through some of this stuff personally, like in the realm of health and fitness, they struggle a lot more in business, just from my own observation, from what I've seen, because a lot of that framework is ultimately the same. So entrepreneurship, if you think about it, it's not going to be a quick fix. And if you're treating your business like a diet, that's probably why it feels hard.
Definitely. And what I picked up while you were speaking was the fact that you mentioned that you had to challenge some of the beliefs, like the hustle. And I remember you posting about, if we think that something is going to be hard, we are going to make it hard. So it's true that we need to do the work, and it's true that we need to make the effort, but we tend to think about things in a way that we grew up with. You know, if you want to be successful, you have to work hard, you have to sweat it, you have to burn out almost.
Mm-hmm.
And that influences how we think about things and how we really, the relationship we have with work, with how we need to do work.
Yeah. And it's such a great point, because a lot of it is conditioned, right? And I love what you said there. If I want to be successful, I have to work hard. When did you decide that, right? What if your definition of success is different than you thought it was? I mean, that whole phrase, my like coaching brain wants to just tear it apart, because there's so many unidentified little subtle beliefs in there, right? So when I'm working with someone, we kind of look at, what does success mean to you? Because for many people, I actually just was recently talking about this on my Instagram stories, and how my definition of success probably looks different than a lot of other entrepreneurs in the industry. You won't see me putting a private jet and popping bottles on my vision board and in my eyesight. Like that's not in my, I don't see that in my pipeline, not because those things aren't great and it wouldn't be fun to have and achieve. That doesn't, I don't feel that, to me, isn't my version of success. And so we have to kind of look at, well, what does success mean for you? What are you hoping to achieve on this journey? Like, what do you want it to feel like? And then from there, we can look at and even just reframe that success is a definition. Success is a correlation of how much fun I'm having and how fulfilled I am in the work that I am doing. Because if you are doing something that truly lights you up, you could almost work and work and work and still be energized by it.
Right. And there is this, definition of what success looks like for you specifically, because I think that we often identify with the definition of success of someone else, of how we grew up, of the things that we have seen people think about success, and our own thoughts as we were younger. And you mentioned the jets, the money,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't even question it sometimes, because
And
that's
that's,
the general definition, right?
well, and that's true. We don't question it. And anything we don't question, we accept as our truth. And so when it comes to that, right, and the power, like the true power of coaching is it allows us to think outside of the box and challenge what we may have accepted as fact. Because again, if we don't challenge our belief, we are tolerating it as a fact and a truth, right? So if we say something like, I will never be successful, what you're saying is, I am tolerating a lack of success. Like that's subconsciously what the subconscious hears, right? I'm tolerating a lack of success. Or we say things like, I talk about never a lot. And it's like, when did you decide that? I mean, unless you can truly like zoom out into the future and see the rest of your timeline, how do you know?
How do you know? That's something that we don't ask ourselves a lot. So I think that's where the coaching can help, in terms of really getting those uncomfortable questions on the table and just making you realize how much we don't challenge ourselves and how much we give for granted because of the way life is, because life is quite fast. We work, we probably have family, we have things to do. So taking that time to reflect on yourself or who you want to be,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
reverse engineering how to get there. I think it's something that anyone can do, and it will really help them redefine that success and that
Mm-hmm.
end goal that they have.
Yeah, and I love how you said reverse engineer, and that's truly what a lot of this work is, right? So we look at that thought of, I'll never be successful, or if I want to be successful, it's going to require hard work. And the truth of the matter is, it is going to require work. What if it doesn't have to be hard? What if it just needs to be intentional?
Yes.
And again, like, how can we relax some of those phrases that we use to make them more palatable to the process? So that's a lot of the work that I do, is just really, we unpack language, we look at beliefs, and when it comes to reverse engineering, it's okay, cool. Who is that version of you being? Right? So before you started your podcast, there was a part of you that decided you wanted to have a podcast. You had to make take some actions that were in alignment with a podcaster, right?
Yes.
And that's how you connected the dots. And that's so cool. It's like, this work is just so powerful. I'm obviously so lit up.
But I like what you say at the beginning. You are in these for a long time, 8 years you mentioned, I think. And I mean, it never ends.
Mm-hmm.
That's the truth of it. The self-discovery, we are changing constantly. So there is no way to stop growing because we change every day. Every day it's a new version of us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about taking that journey and knowing that it will be a journey, that it will constantly change and will constantly also make you rethink about your choices, about who you are and who you hang out with, the environment that you are in, which is so much important.
It is so important. I mean, the people around you are huge. So when it comes to change, there's a phrase, there's a saying, and I can't recall if I heard this on a podcast or read it in a book somewhere, or it might be even an original thought. I don't even know. It's been with me now so long, but it reminds me when I am in seasons of change, that change is inevitable. And what makes change hard is usually us trying to control it. And so the saying, it goes like this: change is inevitable, growth is optional. And so we can choose to make it difficult, or we can choose to be more in flow with it and accepting of it. But we can't actually control change. We can initiate change, but we actually don't have the power to control it. And our ego is like, no, I'm sure some people listening, like even my own, is probably throwing its own little tantrum right now. And so it is looking at those seasons and who do I need to be, and where, and doing that maybe quick little internal check-in. Where am I acting out of alignment? What is falling away? Where am I being called to grow? I mean, there's so many different angles we could look at that.
Definitely. But the fact that we need to surrender to change and sometimes just go with the flow and grow with it and not fight it and put restriction to it, I think it's not easy. Especially as a high achiever, you want to have control, you want to make sure that you are hitting those goals. You want to make sure, and when you don't have control, it feels like I'm not even sure that I will get there if I don't have control.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, you will get there,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even faster.
And maybe even faster. What if it happens sooner? What if it happens sooner? I know. And that goes back, that kind of ties into playing that long game mentality, right? Like, for example, you want to start a podcast, right? You probably don't know all the intricacies of podcasting and what that's going to look like, but you won't know at all if you don't start, right? And it won't happen if you don't start, and you won't have any listeners if you don't launch it. And so it's sometimes playing with your fears. I treat it like a game. And fear seems like it's this big scary thing, and it feels like it's this big scary thing, but when we can make our fear feel really stupid, that's just me, maybe it's just like my dark sense of humor, but I like to make my fear feel really stupid and sound really stupid. And when I can do that, I realize, well, this is silly, Kels. You keeping this podcast microphone under your desk for 9 months and not launching, why? You're not going to have any listeners if you don't launch. And that was a realization I had, years ago before I started my podcast. So I'm just bringing it up for some humor, but yeah, I think finding our fears, and rather than making them this big, scary thing that's about to eat us alive, what if we stood up to it? What if we like clap back a little bit? Right. And I know for me, and again, I've been doing this work longer, and if anyone's new to this might sound a little bit out of the box, but I just clap back to my ego. I clap back to those fears, and it's like, psh, we don't do that anymore. We don't think that anymore. Who are you to tell me that I can't? You know what I mean? So it's fun. You should be a fly on the wall in my my personal bubble sometimes. So.
But I like how you have that internal discussion still, even after 8 years of development and learning and different techniques and all the things that you know, you're not immune. You still have to sometimes clap back and say,
Yeah.
it's not
Take a seat,
exactly.
you know? Yeah. And it's like, we got this. I don't need, and I think we all need a healthy dose of fear sometimes to kind of like push us and rile us up and challenge us a little bit. Because if we don't, the fear is just if we don't challenge it, the fear is just going to win and become the soundtrack of our life. And for most of us, that's not what we want. Right. So yeah, I mean, I'm a human. Just because I have these tools and I have the experience, I'm human. I'm not immune to fear. I'm not immune to limiting beliefs. In fact, one thing that I'm going through right now is a sobriety journey. Recently surrendering my relationship with alcohol, and it's taken on this new form of personal growth for me. And I've really been leaning into it to see how much I like, what can I learn from this? And it is stretching me in a different way. And so it's just been this beautiful experience of, hey, I'm not immune to challenges and I'm not immune to struggle. What I do not want to tolerate, right, is just settling for what's not serving me. And so I'll do the work and I'll share it and I'll be open about it. Because you never know who might need to hear that someone that they maybe potentially look up to is human too, and life happens to them as well.
Yes. And thank you for your vulnerability. I mean, putting yourself out there and sharing your experience. It's such a deep gift for that one person that may need it right now. And I think that's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. We talked about many things. If you had to suggest to our listeners to take away just one thing of all the things that we discussed about, what would that be?
What feels really good for the topics that we discussed today is give yourself permission to meet yourself where you're at right now. Just give yourself permission to meet yourself where you're at right now and celebrate everything that got you here and everything that you're going to become, but really accepting, like really just micro dosing this, zooming it down here. You are enough right now. You are perfect as you are right now. And I think just giving yourself permission to accept that.
What a powerful way to end this podcast. Just know that you are enough. And I needed to hear that today, even.
Yeah,
Thank
receive
you so
that.
much,
Anyway,
Kelsey.
I'll receive my own medicine. Girl, I like half the time I'm like, was that for me or was that for someone else? I don't know, but that felt good. So I'm gonna take a little bit of it too. But it's true. And I think especially as women and high achieving women, and how we can kind of start to future trip a little bit and be on to the next thing, is it's that practice of, wait, I'm enough right now too.
Yes. Yes, Queen. Thank you. Thank you so much for this amazing journey through our discussion. I hope to have you back one time, maybe in the future, to continue this journey. And just know that you, with every word, with every share, I think you're making an impact. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on. This has just been a great pleasure of mine, and I look forward to listening to your podcast and watching it really take off.
This episode is over. However, you can like, subscribe, and follow for more content.